Hey everybody, this is Joe, and I'm back with another episode. Now I do want to take a moment to state that this was every one of these episodes I've done were just me giving my opinions. Now you notice that there isn't music or anything being played. That's because that's because I'd like for these videos to actually show up and be seen by others and get their views as well. But due to copyright laws in many countries, it makes it impossible for music and things like that to be played. And since I'm not musically oriented myself, other than listening to it, that's why I don't use it in these videos. Now on to today's episode. I thought I would actually discuss the Twilight Zone, a series that's had 4 different versions of it since the late 1950s, and it's also on television one of the earliest examples of the twist endings and ways to teach morals and views on social commentary without having gotten in trouble itself for anything it showed. It's had it's had 4 different incarnations of it. The original being in the 60s, the 1985 revival was the first revival. 2002 to 2003, it had a revival. And then most recently, in 2019, it had a revival of 10 episodes that only aired on the CBS network, on the CBS Online network, which I think was unfair because it turns out a lot of the episodes were, again, just remakes of the older episodes or with minor changes, same as the 2002 did in certain episodes. And even in 85, it also had in 2002, it also had a radio series. In 2002. Sorry, let me get that straight. 2002, it had the radio series. In 1983, it produced the Twilight Zone, the movie, which took multiple tales from the series, and a number of them actually got mixed together to create new versions or edited in some way to give alternate versions of the stories, which included one, the quality of mercy. Whereas in the original, it was about a soldier during a war who is known to be mean and cruel. In the alternate version, in 1983's movie, it became about a bigot, a racist bigot who just gotten passed over at his job by a Jewish man. For a Jewish person, and he blamed it that it was the race, and the ethnicity of the person rather than just the fact that he just wasn't that well liked. And throughout this episode in the movie, he gets to experience the Ku Klux Klan attacking him as a black man, being in World War II as a Jewish person who was picked up by the Nazi concentration camp people. And then he had another part in it as well. But it was to show. But an interesting fact about the movie is that same particular episode had a different ending made for it, because in the original ending, he was supposed to be a soldier in Vietnam who saved 2 children, which leads to his change in behavior to somewhat resemble the original, but in the original episode. But they had an accident during the scene with a helicopter that wound up in the death of the children, and I think, if I remember correctly, it was the pilot in the helicopter died, and the film was actually sued over this and found guilt, and agreed that they were guilty of manslaughter, even though it was involuntary and not what they had intended to happen. Despite that, I think it actually made a good movie overall, but there were times I felt it changed some of the stories to fit its purpose as a movie and tried to appeal to a more modern audience at that time, and because of that, it changed. Like I said, it changed how things went or how they were done, and changed the overall feel for the film rather than making it like it's what it was supposed to be based off of. A 1982 song, Twilight Zone by Golden Earring, off their album Cut, was actually a tribute to the original series. And Rush, another band, another rock and roll band, in 1976 had a song that had lyrics based on, "Will the real Martian please stand up and stop over in a quiet town?" 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone series from the 50s through the mid 60s. And before that, Rush had dedicated their previous album, Caress of Steel, to the actual creator, host, and guy who basically wore every hat possible for the original Twilight Zone, Rod Serling. Who you would see, if you saw the original episodes, a lot of old TV show channels that run reruns of them will show it because of how popular it was. He's the guy that you'll see at the beginning of every episode on the 50s. From the late 50s through the early to mid 60s when the show did its original airing. He's the guy who's doing the open narration in every episode. And another interesting fact is that when he actually came up with the show originally and proposed it, it was actually his first adventure. Again, this is according to details I've looked up and fun facts I've tried to find in multiple places. Anyways, when he proposed this show, the network that originally aired it was actually somewhat questioning it, and the original episode he'd come up with as a pilot to the network was about a guy who ran into his therapist's office and told him that he was afraid of dying, and explained how he kept having this dream over and over that he had died. And the network turned down the original episode and made him create a new pilot, which most people will remember when they see it as Season 1, Episode 1's listing, about a man who lands on a desolate planet, and keeps trying to see if there's actually people around. The last man on Earth, basically, is what it equates to. Only this one's on a different planet and investigating it. And like I say, it has a twist ending, which makes a lot more sense, thankfully, for how it was done. But back to Rod Serling's pilot. When he did this, and the network initially didn't want to go with it and made him come up with a new one instead, it was because they didn't think this type of marketing would actually do well at the time. This is time when shows like Andy Griffith and a lot of westerns and stuff were famous, and things like that were famous, like Maverick, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, just to name a few. Anyways, like I said, when he came up with this story and showed it to him, well, apparently somebody must have liked it, because later on there's another episode they do which somewhat shows a similar idea, where this man, assigned to his counselor, therapist, however you want to look at him, and he keeps talking about how he sees this woman in his dreams that he thinks is going to kill him. Well, in the original pilot that Rod had come up with, it actually has it where where it turns out that this guy had been dreaming since he came in and laid down on the couch bed, those old psychiatrist like couches that you see in old TV shows. He was laying on it, but from that moment on, he'd been dreaming the whole thing, because the big reveal to the unaired pilot was that he had actually died the moment he laid there and went to sleep and finally actually took a rest. So everything he'd been seeing was actually in itself a dream, and we just got to go along for the ride, which I thought was actually a great idea for a twist ending, especially in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, when you were getting all these happy, joyful things in type episodes, or lessons that, when they were trying to teach morality, played things way too simply and didn't really show much in that way. And your 30 minutes to an hour long episode were basic of the week things rather than continuous. There are a number of shows, I believe, even though they may not have been, but they actually, to me, they actually resemble the Twilight Zone. In the 60s, and another show that had a lot of revivals of it, at least one other revival, was The Outer Limits. Then you had Rod Serling, and you had Rod's next show that he went to after the Twilight Zone, that a lot of people, including my parents, remember really well, Night Gallery, which focused more on the supernatural rather than the stories like the Twilight Zone did that were science fiction, but based in morals and societal views. Other shows include Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Dark Side. Both of those were actually took their stories from comic books and things, but they did the twist ending all the same. And movies, Tales from the Hood, which had a recent sequel, Tales from the Hood 2, and even the movie that Snoop Dogg did called Hood of Horror, where Snoop Dogg played this guy who went around collecting souls, but he told stories in it about people. To me, this one showed a lot of the same ideas as, these all showed the ideas that the Twilight Zone had already shown and been showing when they came about. And Hood of Horror did more gory and more Tales from the Crypt series type styling, but at the same time, it focused on that darkness and twist ending that mainly that you would find in the Twilight Zone. Okay, now for my top 10, I took it from all versions of the Twilights, including the revivals from the 80s to early 2000s and the most recent. I took my top 10 of what I thought were the greatest episodes. Number 10 is What You Need, which aired December 25th, 1959. Where it's about a little criminal who comes along, and he comes across this guy who's selling what people need. Or he says that they'll need this, and the people can be at one moment thinking, this man's crazy, just giving away stuff, what a nuisance. And then it turns out he's actually right. Well, the criminal sees this and starts using it to his advantage, kept asking this guy, what do I need? What do I need? And he would give him these things. And then it eventually leads to his undoing, because it proves, to me, this episode showed how knowing the future can be dangerous, and how greed will eat you alive. if you let it control you, and the wanting of more and more. While it appears to sound like gluttony instead of greed, this one showed more about greed than gluttony. Okay, number 9, and this one's even ranked on many lists for one of the top episodes of the Twilight Zone. Same as it is mine, so it tells you how good it was. And it surprised me how many times this one even got into like Time magazine and stuff. And magazines like that were known for telling of great things that actually ranked episodes, and this one came up. Eye of the Beholder aired November 11th, 1960. The title, to me, was a reference to the old saying, which is mentioned in the episode, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. In this one, it's about a woman who's gone through all these surgeries to try and make herself look like the people that are considered normal in society. And she's wanting to be beautiful. And this episode explores the idea of how beauty can be sought, or that judging it causes issues and the problems with it, and how desperate people can get, and how it can lead to discrimination even among people. Like I said, and this one has a really good twist for it that actually works really nicely. The original title for this, not the original title, but one of the later when it was rebroadcasted, instead of Eye of the Beholder, they retitled it to Private World of Darkness in 1962 in the UK. Well, in a revival that was done in 2002 2003, they used the original title, and for the most part, it actually followed the original story. Again, only changing a minor detail, and to where it didn't make a difference, but the story was still about the same idea. That beauty of a person shouldn't be based on their appearance. Okay, number 8, from October 9th, 1959, One for the Angels. In this one, a peddler, nice guy just selling things on the street, comes across the Grim Reaper, so to speak, or an angel of death, however you want to look at it, and finds out that he's supposed to die that day. Well, he ends up finding a way to save himself, and it ended up costing, by the way he saved himself was by telling the angel of death that he had unfinished business, and that he wanted to make a pitch that was so great that it would even be one that the angels would be impressed with. So the angel ends up agreeing to this, but tells him there will be a consequence for his actions. And unfortunately, while the man thinks he's getting away with something good because he just defeated death, so to speak, one of these kids he cares about ends up hit by a car. Complete accident type thing. And the kid ends up seeing the Grim Reaper, which nobody else that's alive is able to see. Well, the salesman realizes this when the child sees it and what it means, and now he has to decide how he's going to make this pitch for the angels. That one for the angels pitch that's going to save this child and break the deal that the Grim Reaper has, that at midnight, or I think it was midnight in the story, in the episode, this child is supposed to die from the injuries and not being able to recover from them. Well, now he's got till then to try and get the deal fixed. And the title is well done for this episode because it was the man's wish and shows how he goes about it to try and complete this so-called wish that he had. Another one, and one I've really enjoyed, Number 7 came from January 20th, 1961. The Whole Truth. And this one, it stereotypes the car salesman as we know them. I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes that we know. That they're scummy and they're liars and just out to make a quick buck off of people's what some would call ignorance and others would call not being knowledgeable in areas. The story starts off, this guy's selling a car that's expected to only get like 10 miles down the road to a guy after making it sound like it was a Rolls Royce when it was really basically a Pinto in terms of goodness and worth. And this car he buys from this old man's an old Model A, one of the early model cars that came out. Well, he does what's known as lowballing this old man, thinking, it's just easy to get rid of it from him. And I can turn around, make something good out of this story and sell it. Well, the moment he does this, the old man warns him that there's a curse on the car. He doesn't believe him at first. Well, then this couple comes up, tries to buy one of these cars he knows is a total crapshoot, and he finds out he can't lie to him. He even talks him out of buying the car and going to another dealer for a better car, for a better chance at a car that would be worth something. And when he comes to realize that this car he bought really is actually cursed and that he needs to get rid of it as quick as possible, he spends the episode trying to figure out how to get rid of it. And hoping that he can actually find a way to make a living still, and wondering how much the truth is going to affect his life by doing this. One really good thing about this episode is that it showed how the relations between Russia and the U.S. were during this time, and how unstable they were, and how we were at each other's throats. Number 6 on the list, this one actually came from the second revival, which came out during the 2002-2003 season. From September 18th, 2002, the episode entitled Evergreen. General Hospital fans who happened to watch this revival would notice that a number of actors from the show, from General Hospital, from the soap opera, actually appeared on this show in one way, as a guest star, sometimes as the main star even. Also singers like Jessica Simpson and other well-known people at that time showed up as well. But in this particular episode, General Hospital's original Emily Quartermain, aka Amber Tamlin, is in it as a child who has issues and known for being in trouble and has her hair dyed and is causing her parents and family and sister lots of trouble because of the trouble she gets into. And they've had to move at least once already when they've come to this new gated community. Well, this one shows how some people, in this episode, shows how what can be considered normal by society's standards can be sought after so much, and how dangerous the effect of going after that can be. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was the first episode of that revival, and it was one of the most remembered ones I have of it, and of that particular version, because this episode was so well done and did nicely at how it showed the importance of family. It showed the importance of being able to not cause trouble, but at the same time knowing when to stand up and knowing when to say that enough was enough or that something was wrong. And again, it showed how the idea of what's considered normal by society can be or in this case, a certain community, how dangerous it can be in the end. And number 5 on my list, from March 2nd, 1962, To Serve Man. This one shows a group of aliens who stand taller than Wilt Chamberlain, Andre the Giant, and a lot of other famous celebrities. These people were supposed to these aliens were supposed to stand at 9 feet tall. They come to Earth stating that they're going to help mankind, all of humanity, to get rid of the problems they have, such as pollution and war and many other things as well. Well, the people at first are a little worried and distrustful, and they're even presented with a book that these people believed in, that these people are said to believe in and see as a good thing. Well, as time goes on, it appears that these people are actually doing these people actually do as they said. They've ended war. They've stopped the nuclear arms races. They've even cured diseases that at that time were still considered to be deadly, and even today are known to be problematic and even deadly. And they still continue to decipher the book, and now they're even offering these people trips to their planet and allowing them to see where they're where these heroes actually hail from, so that they can enjoy the new society as well. This episode, to me, actually goes back to ancient stories and sayings and fits to the one known as "Beware the Greeks bearing gifts," such as in the Trojan War. And you watch this episode, you'll understand why. It's also one of the few in the original series to actually be known to have broken the fourth wall, where the character actually talks to the audience in this idea, or in some form, as if they were actually part of the episode rather than just somebody watching it. Also, this episode was parodied in the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror 1990 episode, and also in The Naked Gun 2.5 Smell of Fear. American heavy metal band Nuclear. Sorry, I'm not sure on their name exactly. I'm making sure on these facts. Nuclear Assault featured a song with the lyrics that were based on the same theme of this episode, and this was on their album entitled Something Wicked, which to me states that this band had a lot of good ideas. It had a lot of interest in what would be considered sci-fi, horror, and twist type deals. And also, with that title of Something Wicked, makes me think they were fans of Macbeth, for Something Wicked This Way Comes. Number 4, from November 20th, 1959, Time Enough at Last. In this one, you come upon a nice man who likes to read, but unfortunately, he can't read at home because his wife gets mad at him for it, and the only place that leaves him is at work, and it ends up interfering with his work to the point that he's getting fired. Well, he wishes that he just had time to read more because he loves to read so much. And he gets his wish due to a nuclear holocaust, basically, where all life except him is taken out of this world during a nuclear attack. And the thing that saved him is that he went down to, I think it was the basement area, which happened to be able to survive this attack. When the man comes out alive, he's thinking, great, he's got all this time to read, makes a lot of books. At first, he looks for people, and then he remembers how much trouble he had with them, and he couldn't actually do what he wanted. And that now he has his greatest wish. It's him and the books, giving him plenty of time. And this episode ends up teaching you, be careful what you wish for. And also, how important people can be, even if you can't particularly get along with them at any time. Number 3. From March 4th, 1960, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. In this episode, a little suburban neighborhood is suddenly going through blackout, having its lights flash on and off, having issues in it. And as it goes on, this little boy tells them about how he read about it in these comics and in stories about how aliens and how aliens were doing this. This is how they would come to take control. They would infiltrate the neighborhood, take over, and then at some point, when they did the takeover, they would cause all these problems to lead up to them being able to take over. Well, while most of the adults discarded that, they went with another theory that was running rampant during this time: McCarthyism, known as the Second Red Scare, which I have discussed in a previous video. And that they were thinking this is how the Russians were going to start attacking and taking over their area. Well, that was in the original, and like I said, it dealt with McCarthyism, the idea of an alien, and how the most dangerous beings to people, to mankind, is actually mankind itself. The remake, which came in the 2002 to 2003 series, actually features Andrew McCarthy. And instead of focusing on the idea of aliens or the Russians just flat out attacking and taking over, it instead, in this one, focused on something that was relevant at that time: terrorism, and how the terrorists were going to attack and cause this type of damage and cause issues in the community. And again, same idea, just a different take on what the main idea was, other than the fact that mankind is its own worst enemy. Number 2 on the list. And this one was actually kind of tough for me to do, because between number 2 and number 1, it was a really tight race. And the only reason this one got number 2 instead is because I remember number 1 more actively, more easily, and enjoyed it a lot more in the general sense. But number 2 on the list, from October 13th, 1961, is an episode called Game of Pool, where this guy had been living in a pool hall forever, basically, and beating everybody to make them think he was number 1, but he was always being compared to a legend who had died years to decades before, known as Spats. And he's tired of getting compared to these people. He honestly believes he is the best. And it comes down that he gets his wish to play the best to prove it. And throughout the episode, you see him and Fats, as the guy was known, going back and forth about being the best and how important it was, while Fats actually reflects on life in other areas and telling him how he was missing out on this and that type things. And that being the best can only mean so much. Which led me to what I believe the character of Fats was actually referring to, is that living a life is more important than being the best at something. To know that you had people that you could care about and that cared about you, rather than, oh, you're just some picture on the wall. Because once you lose that title of being the best, what do you have left? You gotta go on with your life still, unless you actually die after losing the title of being the best. It also shows how pride, this particular episode also shows how pride is one of the dangerous things that can hurt you. And how being the best comes at the cost. The later remake in the 80s revival of it, they remade this episode and they used the original ending, which shows what happens when you lose, which shows what happens when you lose against the best, to how you're still second best. What do you got to show? Like I said, the two versions, while they have different ending ideas, still to me show the same message overall about how living a life is more important than just being the best at something. Now, I'm not saying you can't be the best and live a life. I'm saying that you need to have the balance of the two to have the life like Fats describes in the episode, in the original episode, which I'm more of a fan of than the remake. Okay, number one on my list from March 20th, 1964. The Masks. Masks. It's about a man who's dying and his family comes to see him. Only he knows they don't like him and that they're only there waiting for him to die so they can inherit the money and any other assets or whatever you would consider an inheritance. Well, he tells them that while most of them, and each of these people have their own problems, like the son, the man who's dying, his son, the head of the family that comes to visit. The son is this man who only focuses on business, doesn't really care for anything else except for how do you make a profit? How do you do this or that? The wife in this episode, I would list as a hypochondriac severely, because it seems throughout the episode alone she comes up with a different feeling or ailment that she feels she has, and that no doctor can seem to figure out what's wrong with her, and even they believe it. And the man who's dying believes, and even jokes with her about her being the victim, and in such great, showing such great strength by showing up to this event. The daughter in this episode is in anything I can think of, she would be the ideal vision of the sin of vanity. She's a lot like the evil queen in Snow White, who was so focused on her beauty that she had a mirror. Well, in this episode, this girl doesn't even, I mean, when she says hello to her grandfather, she isn't even looking at him. She's looking at herself in the mirror, focusing on her looks still. And the son, I mean, the grandson in this episode, whose sister, so it would be the granddaughter, that's the main one. The grandson, he makes me seriously question if he's a serial killer in the future, if he's going to be a future serial killer, with the way this episode begins, because he talks about how he tortures little animals and takes enjoyment in it, and how he seems to have no real connection to people in any way. And he even made me a little bit worried with the way the acting was done for this character, showing how good the actor who portrayed him was. But anyways, like I said, this family is waiting for this old man to die so that they can inherit all this money and anything he owns. But he tells them that since they are down there for what would have been a festival, I mean, during the time of a festival, I think it was actually Carnival. No. Yeah, I think it was Carnival in New Orleans. What would be, I think the other name, it's a really famous holiday. Fats Tuesday, I think is what it's actually supposed to be. When they do that big celebration, party all day and night. I forget what the actual name is, so I'm sorry I'm saying it. Mardi Gras. That's what I'm thinking of. It's supposed to be Mardi Gras, and the town has a tradition of celebrating by wearing masks that represent the image that's the opposite of their character. Well, to inherit the money, at midnight, when this old man knows he's supposed to pass away, they have to wear these masks that he had bought that represented the ideal opposite. And they were not allowed to take them off until midnight, until after the night was over completely. They had to wait for the whole 12th stroke of midnight even before they could take them off. Well, this episode, as it's revealed in the episode, and since it's revealed in the episode itself, at the beginning, the old man is going to die. That's how things are. His actual choice of a mask is a skull. Full-on skeleton. Whole thing. I mean, look for it. Well, in the end of the episode, when it shows him, they state how peaceful he looks and how this is the true face of death. Which to me shows the idea of how death is not to be feared. And through each of the masks that they wear, I think it also shows how the inner nature of people and the corruption of it can affect their outer appearance. And how the masks show who we truly are and can't hide that, because eventually it bleeds through. Anyways, leave me your comment on your favorite episode of the Twilight Zone, no matter which version it was, from the 50s up to the most current revival. And also, anything you think of that I might have left out that you enjoyed about the show. And also, again, please, I ask of you, give me a topic for for a video, and I will at least consider it, possibly even do it as I have done before. And have a good day, night, whatever time it is when you're watching this. Goodbye, everybody.